Could you imagine not pulling sumo and watching this whole video? Like, what are you even doing? So when it comes to which context I recommend this exercise, certainly when you're peaking. What's up guys, it's Johnny Candito of Candito Training HQ. Today's video is on the sumo stiff leg deadlift. Now I'm making this video for two reasons. The first one being that there is not any good video actually out there on the sumo stiff leg deadlift on all of YouTube that I could find. So that's a pretty rare thing with YouTube fitness at this point to actually have a real slot to fill. And secondly, because in my Candito deadlift program, I have this as a fairly highly recommended exercise. In terms of transference, it ranks quite high for the sumo deadlift. So just in case you are pulling sumo and you are on that program, I want you to have a visual point of reference just to make sure that you're doing it properly. So first, let's get into how to do it. So there are going to be three main points here, and only one of them is decently complicated. The rest are fairly simple. So of course you want your shin angle to be as vertical, or you could even think about having a negative shin angle. Basically having your knees push away from the bar rather than having them come forward to meet the bar. That's the easiest way to think about it. Certainly you do not want a positive shin angle. You are just absolutely doing it wrong if you have that. Now secondly, this is going to be the more complex issue, is that you want to focus on externally rotating your hips as a cue of intent, but at the same time you don't want to actually push your knees out. So you don't want to actually abduct and externally rotate your hips to where it's visible outside of the fact that you're just angling those femurs out, and then you can see the direction at which your knees are pointing. But again, you're not actually bending at the knee to let those knees fully abduct out. So a good way to think about it is to just imagine putting enough pressure on the outsides of your feet so your arches don't collapse, while still having your knees be inside your feet. Because that's what we want. We do not want proper alignment from the front where your knees are over your feet. Because if they are, then your hips are just going to sink down into a regular sumo deadlift. Basically what we want to simulate is when someone locks their knees out slightly before they lock out then their hips, but just having that knee lock be for the entire range of motion. Now of course the knee lock doesn't need to be a hard one, as you do want just enough wiggle room for actual hip extension. So to get to the third point here, it's that you can keep the bar a little bit closer to you than in a normal conventional stiff leg deadlift. And of course it depends on how you do the conventional stiff leg deadlift. There are a million different opinions out there. Some people have their shoulders way far forward in front of the bar, but they keep the bar close still, just pushing with their lats really hard. Other people like myself, and even Ed Cohn recommends, actually letting the bar actively drift in front to keep those hips really high and to make sure that those shoulders are really far forward.
Tiny, tiny bend in the knee. Now you see a difference. A lot of people stick their butt back and pull it here, close to them. I don't do that. I keep my abs super tight.
You're pushing that weight all the way out by your toes.
Yeah.
On the sumo, you should be able to keep the bar very close to you no matter what. Because again, we don't have to adjust with those variables, as the main thing we're looking at is preventing those knees from getting out. Those knees are staying inside of our feet with just enough external rotation that we're not actually having knee ligament issues or anything like that, or having to have our feet pointed forward. So when it comes to which context I recommend this exercise, certainly when you're peaking. That is the biggest use of this, is that it's such a close variation, but it's also easy to load up with fairly lighter weight, so you can do it directly after your regular sumo deadlifts. And basically replace what you do, maybe a conventional deadlift, wide stance snatch grip deadlift, an exercise like that. Replace that with the sumo stiff leg deadlift on your competition phase cycle, so that then that'll just help even more with peaking with increased specificity across the board. Another purpose, and this one's a little bit less, I recommend this a little bit less strongly, but it is also effective for people who have issues with lockout. Because of course you are focusing on keeping that back flat, but then also again you're focusing on keeping those feet flared out while then finishing with your hips still despite that. So it's not just in terms of hamstring strength of being able to pull through and working on muscular weakness, but also its stability. Being able to practice that stability, pulling through that lockout with that foot angle being exactly the same as your competition stance sumo. And that's why it's incredibly important that you do not just point your feet forward and give up on the external rotation on this. Because if you do that, it will be more stable and it will be an easier lift, and then it will be less practical to the competition sumo. So that's it, guys. I hope this video was helpful. Make sure to like the video, support the channel, subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.